everybody. Welcome in. Welcome back in to this Tuesday edition of Let's Talk Live here on the LTL Media Channel. It has been an absolute crazy just over 24 hours in the Bryan Kohberger case. And I'm perplexed. I'm shocked. I'm angry. Satisfied. There's tons of emotions running through me right now. I mean, it's just, all these reports that are coming out, and, you're hearing that, every family is basically on board with this except for the Gonsalveses, and I feel bad for them. And it's wild. It's absolutely wild. And, I'm going to try to sort through all of this tonight and how this all came down, and you hear reports that the family didn't even get, proper notice, and they only had 24 hours to get there for tomorrow's hearing at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Wow. I did not see this coming, and it was crazy. Last night I had my good friend, attorney Nan Gallagher, here up in the studio. We literally were just going to do a sit down and kind of tell me her story. And on the way as she's driving over here, the Kohberger news breaks, and I'm like, we've got to talk about this. And she's like, yeah, let's do it. So, we bounce on and do 2 hours of Kohberger last night. If you haven't watched that stream, go back and watch it. It was great. It's great to have Nan in here. I felt bad. She didn't feel good. And I hope that she feels better. I actually checked in with her today. She said she feels horrible, and she's just resting right now. So Nan, if you're watching, I hope you're feeling better. And this is just, it's wild. Michelle says the families are angry. Yes. Super, super, super angry. Rhonda saying that she's shocked too. Hey, look at this. It looks like the chat is normal again. These friggin' @ signs were driving me crazy. The @ signs were driving me crazy. We have like normal chat names again, which is great. I'm glad to see that. Rhonda said the chat last night was great. It was. It was a great show last night. I felt bad for Nan. I just said, I'm not going to keep her here too long. But anyway, let's get into Kohberger a little bit here. So, I'm trying to go back and look at preparing for trial. We started getting recent reports that were saying witnesses from Pennsylvania would be ordered to testify. We had a jail guard that was set to testify. We started hearing on Good Morning America from some of the friends that are involved in an upcoming documentary that's going to be released, ironically, on Amazon, I believe on July 11th. And I definitely am going to be checking that out. I actually might do a viewing party for that. We've done those before. So if you all want to come over and watch it with me, just keep up to date, and we'll probably end up doing that. So, the thing that just really bothers me about this whole thing is that, just like, Christy and Steve had said through this entire process over almost 3 years, is that, the prosecutor's offices in the state have not really been fully transparent with them through this entire investigation. And right away, when this happened, there was a supreme gag order put on this case. So it was very hard to get information, even to the families, which was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And that angered me. But, if you did a lot of sleuthing, like we all did in those documents, you could start partially putting together some of the information and things that law enforcement were looking at. I did tons of videos on this 2 years ago, started breaking down, going through all those court documents, talking about all the possibilities of things that could have happened. And I would say everything that we talked about, but some of those things that we talked about actually came forth in information that was either leaked or talked about in documentaries or written about in articles. And I was like, wow, some of these things were pretty spot on. But I think that, oh boy, how do I look at all this? The over compounding of evidence that was going to put Bryan Kohberger in and around that house on that night, I always felt was damning. And I have a list of things that I want to read. Bear with me here, and I should have had this up on before, but I listed a bunch of things in one of my comment sections. Someone was kind of coming at me about evidence today. Let me see. So I have, I'll list 20 of them. The things that I always felt that was pretty damning. DNA found on the knife sheath left at the crime scene. The knife sheath was found next to two of the victims. DNA matched to Kohberger through genealogy and direct testing. We had cell phone data that shows he was near the house multiple times before the murders. His phone was off during the time of the murders and then turned back on near his home. Surveillance footage captured a white Hyundai Elantra circling the area, same as his car. His car had been seen leaving the crime scene at a high speed. Surviving roommates described a man with bushy eyebrows. That's Dylan Mortensen. Kohberger matches the detail. He cleaned his car thoroughly right after the murders, removing floor mats, using bleach. He was seen wearing gloves at a grocery store after the murders. He acted nervous during a cross-country drive with his father. He had a Reddit post asking criminals how they felt while committing crimes. He studied criminology and had a fascination with serial killers. His university was less than 10 miles from the crime scene. His classmates said he discussed crime in unusual, disturbing ways. No solid alibi has been publicly proven. You remember his driving around and just stargazing. He changed his license plate registration shortly after the murders. He allegedly stalked the victim's home at least 12 times before the killings. He returned to the scene just hours after the murders, according to phone data. And then the DoorDash driver eyewitness account, and that's the newest piece of information that came out, places Kohberger at the scene that evening. So, multiple things here that probably was going to nail this guy down. And I think just the overwhelming and abundance of evidence that would have came out in trial would have seriously nailed this guy down. And, I started to think about, why now take a plea? So if I'm Bryan Kohberger, obviously I'm talking to my family. You're probably going to now at some point confess to them that you've done this. And maybe they went to him and said, hey, can you spare us at least in some of this? Spare us in the sense that all these awful things are going to come out in court about you. And we don't want to have to deal with the aftermath. Yes, you're going to sit in prison the rest of your life on this plea deal because there's going to be no death penalty. And you're going to give up your right to appeal, but you're going to sit in a prison for the rest of your life. Can you at least spare the agony that we're going to have to continue to go through and minimize that? Listen, they're going to be talked about and ridiculed, and a question of subjects. I'm talking about the family and Kohberger herself for many years. So maybe they came to him and said, hey, can we at least have you just take this plea? Yes, you won't die. You'll live in prison the rest of your life. But on the flip side of that, taking this plea, we never may know what truly happened, what truly was the motivation. And it's sad. And I think things will eventually leak out over time, of course, because that's usually what happens in these types of cases. But we're never going to get really, most likely, the full story. And that's sad because the family's never going to get all the details of how this all led up to what happened back in 2022 in November. So it sucks. I was really looking forward to the trial, looking forward to seeing what information came out, see if any of my predictions or my assumptions or theories were correct. And it really hurts these families. I feel bad. I feel bad for Christy and Steve. I feel bad for, all the other families, Xana's family, Ethan's family, Maddie's family, that they've had to go through this for the last 3 years. And this is how essentially tomorrow it's going to end. But I always felt like right now, maybe this was, and another angle that I thought about too, is that maybe this was a power play move on Kohberger, knowing that he did this, knowing that he was gonna, he had this plea deal that he could take, but this was, a power move. And now at the very last minute, he throws a middle finger up to the family and says, you're never going to know because this is never going to go to trial. I'll just take a plea deal and go sit in prison the rest of my life. Now, will he ever talk? We don't know. Will he ever really say what happened? We don't know. But things tend to somewhat come out in conversations. So I think it's going to take a while. I think it may take years. People will talk, eyewitnesses that were probably in and around that area that will want to tell the story of what they saw that night. So lots of things to talk about, lots of things that will be in the future about this case. I don't see it going away too soon. I think there'll still be a lot of conversation surrounding this case. And certainly, as information comes out on it, we'll be talking about it. And tomorrow, the plea hearing, if it is live, I'm speculating here, I think it is, I will be playing that live tomorrow, live streaming it. So if you want to join me, I believe it's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's move on. So we look here, the family completely blindsided. It does suck that the whole story is never going to really come out. And then I look at the conspiracy theorist over the last 2 years. Now, to be honest with you, I've kind of dipped out of the Kohberger case. It really wasn't going anywhere. We really weren't getting any new information until this case got transferred to Boise, where Judge Hippler just started saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we're going to start unsealing some of these documents. And that he did. And then we started getting a litany of information that came in. We heard a lot of arguments from Ann Taylor to continue to delay this case. We heard a lot of arguments about the alibi, about the DNA evidence. And, as much as I don't like Ann Taylor, and there were really some very subpar things that she did, quoting laws from like 1775, and going back to Idaho law from like 1775, pulling out, I guess, any trick or thing that she could use to defend her client, delaying this over and over and over and over again. It was really getting tiring. And I was just like, let's just get this thing to trial. And, listen, my prediction was right. I was in the camp of that Kohberger did this. That was my opinion in this. And, look at now we're a day away from a plea deal, and ultimately he's going to confess that he did do this. So, let's go through basically the last 24 hours here. I'm going to read from my slide. So initial plea deal accepted. Kohberger accepted a plea deal and pled guilty to 4 counts of, he's going to plead guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary, sparing him the death penalty. Now everybody goes, well, burglary, why that? Well, burglary, the definition, and I don't know clearly off Idaho law, is essentially you're going to someone's house and you're unwanted. And that's usually what that charge means in a layman's term. So let's see, CBS News reports prosecutors in a letter state that he had waived his right to face 4 consecutive life sentences, plus up to 10 years for the burglary charge. Sentencing expected late July if the plea entered. Otherwise, trial proceeds. So I don't know. I mean, he could play a trick tomorrow and say, bullshit, we're going to trial. And he still has time to think about this, but I don't know. I think he's going to take this hearing. So the hearing is set for tomorrow to enter his plea. Sentencing timing is contingent on this. We had the Gonzalez's that spoke up. The Gonzalez family released a furious statement about the plea deal's timing, calling it unexpected and accusing prosecutors of rushing them with minimal notice. And we're going to hear from Steve Gonzalez tonight, because what I'm going to do is play an awesome episode of Banfield last night that's going to give us the skinny of the rundown, and you're going to hear from Steve Gonzalez on that episode. So ABC News reports the plea deal includes waiving appeal, restitution to the family, 4 life sentences plus 10 years. The defense initiated the request. Prosecutors met with families saying the plan was, quote, in the best interest of justice. Was it really? Was it really in the best interest of justice? I'm going to ask you that question here in the chat. Let me know. Do you think this was in the best interest of justice? My personal feeling, let the trial play out. These families waited so long, almost 3 years, just about 3 years, for this trial to take place. And I really wanted, in this situation, an eye for an eye. I feel that it was really warranted in this case. If Bryan Kohberger did this, which now with this plea deal, he's accepting the terms that he did do this, I wanted to see it to go to court. I wanted to see the full evidence out there. I wanted us to be able to debate over the evidence and, formulate our opinions based on the evidence. And I wanted the families to know for sure what happened that night. They have that right to that. So there's going to be a lot of argument. There's going to be a lot of speculation about this. But does it put an end to this situation? Does it surely put Kohberger behind bars so we can never do something like this ever again? Yes. Protects those families, it protects the community, and it protects anybody that would be in and around this guy out in society. So you can look at it on that side. So families criticize receiving the plea deal via email. I think a super low blow. Again, prosecution in this has blindsided the family and has not kept them completely up to date in this. It's pretty frustrating how they handled this case, given its magnitude. Given only a day's notice before the July 2nd hearing, University of Idaho extends condolences, but notes this outcome ensures conviction and life imprisonment. I didn't like the fact that the university, with that extreme gag order, families couldn't talk, but the University of Idaho could put a book out. They can talk, and you had all these interviews, but the family wasn't allowed to do any of this stuff. Pretty overwhelming. So defense theory, we're going to bounce with this autism defense. Defense had previous argued Kohberger's autism spectrum diagnosis as a rationale against the death penalty, stating, quote, he displays extremely rigid thinking, thus executing would be unconstitutional. Obviously, that's not going to work. And then the timeline impact. The plea deal halts the scheduled trial that was slated for August 11th in Boise, unless Kohberger withdraws the plea. We're going to have to see what actually happens tomorrow in that. But let's get to the Banfield episode. This was very informative last night, and I'm looking forward to watching this. I saw clips of it, and I haven't seen it in its entirety, but we're going to get through it. Mazda Media checking in, saying, not sure why he'd rather spend the life in prison over the death penalty. He said, you get life in prison, your life is effectively over. Absolutely. I agree. Why not go through the trial, right? Why not go through the trial? But it's going to save a lot of money. It's going to save a lot of angst. And from what I'm hearing, the evidence that was going to come out, those awful photos, we would have seen crime scene photos. They would have been released. They were ready for it. They wanted this trial to happen. All the details would have came out. But anyway, let's get to Banfield. Very educational episode last night. I'm really looking forward to watching this, and I appreciate everybody being here. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you're not subscribed up. All right, here's Banfield.
There is breaking news, and there is breaking news. And when you do a true crime show and something happens at the level it happened today, this is sort of calamitous, so to speak. You may have heard by now, but that man, Bryan Kohberger, has decided to throw in the towel, so to speak. And the government has tossed that towel at him. Bryan Kohberger has agreed to take a plea deal from the state of Idaho in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students 2.5 years ago. I didn't expect this, y'all. I did not expect to come on the air with you. I'm on vacation right now, just so you know. I did not expect this. 1 month till jury selection.
I'm going to pause this real. Christy says, given the fact that they could be on a Zoom call or FaceTime with the family members, this should have been discussed with all of them first. Why only part of them? Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question. I think that Bill Thomas knows that he would have got extreme resistance from the Gonzalez family. That's what this is. They didn't want to argue about it. So at very last minute, let's sneak this in there. Let's send the families an email, and this is it. It's a done deal. It's over. I even almost think that the prosecution didn't even want to go through this case. It was slated for 3 months, a 3-month case. Can you imagine the money the taxpayers would have had to pay for this? The inconveniences to those families having to drive from, their homes all the way up to Boise. I can't confirm, but maybe someone in here, I think it was taking like the Gonzalez family like 6 to 8 hours to drive up to Boise. And I could be wrong on that if someone can correct me. But anyway, let's get to Banfield.
I already had my plane ticket booked. I was ready to go. And I expected to be in Idaho pretty much until November, when a jury would decide if he was guilty or not guilty or would be going to the death penalty, right? I did not expect a plea agreement this close to trial. But there are all sorts of reasons why this may have happened, and I am going to go over all of them with a lot of very special guests, and one of those very special guests is Steve Gonzalez and his attorney. They are going to join me in a few minutes for their first national interview, and my heart is absolutely breaking for them. This was not what they wanted. This was not what the Gonzalez family wanted. They were vehemently opposed. I think it's more important to say they were vehemently opposed. Kaylee on the far right, her family has fought tooth and nail against any kind of concession on this. They wanted to see this all the way through to what they had hoped would be a firing squad. Xana Kernodle's family, apparently, according to TMZ, very upset about this. They spoke with an aunt.
Yeah, I can answer this. Hey, Adam. Adam says, why aren't you out there getting people to speak out against the prosecution and flood his phone for accepting a plea deal against the family's wishes after he slaughtered 4 innocent people? You went the extra mile for Karen Reed, one person. Why aren't you fighting for 4 lives? Well, here's my answer to that. It's just happened yesterday, and I work, and I had to do a lot of research and kind of figure out what was going on. So I don't think they can be responsible for that. But I get your point. But that's not my cross to bear. Sorry. I mean, this just literally happened yesterday. I'm not in Idaho. I can't go out and assemble a rally or a protest. But if you're out there, maybe you can assemble one. I'm sure there will be protests out there. I'm sure the family will be out there in protest. But I don't know. I'm sorry. So we'll keep playing on here.
Of Xanas who said they are all upset. Maddie Mogan was best friends with Kaylee. And so Kaylee's family knows the Mogans, and they seem to be in lockstep. Ethan Chapin's parents, it's been a little different for them.
And you really never know. This guy might think overnight and say, nope, I don't want to accept the plea deal. He has every right to do that. This could go to trial. We don't know. We don't know if he's playing a game, but we're going to find out tomorrow when the hearing happens. I believe it's 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll have to wait till then to see, because he may back out at the very last minute and just say, no, I wanted to go to trial.
Anyone else with the pain and suffering they've been through. But as far as death penalty was concerned, it just wasn't the highest priority. It was not going to bring Ethan back. Did they change their minds over the months and months they've been waiting for this justice? I don't know. They're very, very quiet about this. There are 2 people not on that chart, and they are not in this picture either. They're cropped out because they survived. They are the 2 surviving roommates from 1122 King Road. They are also victims of this crime, and they also have a say. I can just guess that Bethany and Dylan did not want to go to trial because they have lived hell as well over the last 2.5 years. And going to trial and getting up on that witness stand and saying what they know while the world watches and then dissects everything about them like they have before, I imagine they did not want that. But I can tell you this is a horrifyingly difficult decision to make. Why the prosecutors offered, only they can tell us that. And I hope one day they will. They may not. Why Bryan Kohberger accepted? Oh, I can definitely weigh in on that. They had him dead to rights. And when I say dead, I mean dead. They had him dead to rights. I said the same thing about OJ, though. And so I know better than to say slam dunk 100%. There's always a little bit of room in reasonable doubt. So there's always that risk. Did they have him 100%? As far as the facts and the evidence, yeah. Was there a chance someone might get on that jury and hang it and cause a retrial? Yeah, sure.
Karen Reed.
Was there a chance that maybe they would convict and not choose death? Is that possible? Would a jury convict maybe and say, but we can't do death penalty? Saw it in Jodi Arias. So yeah, that's a possibility too. So these are all part of the recipe, right? Bryan Kohberger will be standing up and saying that he's guilty of killing all 4 of these kids on Wednesday, 2 days from now. Brian Enton has been on this story since the beginning.
I wonder if he's going to use Ann Taylor to do that, or I wonder if he's going to have to actually do it. I think he's going to actually have to do it. But we know how he hid behind his plea, that he didn't enter a plea. He had his attorney do it for him in front of Judge. Remember that?
And he broke this news today about the plea deal. He joins me live now. You and I have been sort of talking all day, whether it's been on the phone or over the airwaves, that we're both pretty gobsmacked by this. There's an emotional toll that, these families go through, and then you become very invested as a reporter as well.
Yeah, I mean, I told you earlier, Ashley, I was totally shocked by this in the sense that people have been asking me for the last several months, do you think that there is going to be a plea deal? And I always very strongly said, no, I don't think there is. I have not gotten that inclination at all from the prosecutor. I have not gotten that feeling that that is what most of the family members want, and they have a really solid case. And that is how I always felt and what I told people until Friday, until 3 days ago. And that is when I learned that there was this meeting with victims' families and that this first came up. What would you think of a plea deal? And what happened after that is strange because it happened quickly and it happened over the weekend. It was last night. It was on a Sunday night that the prosecution sent over a proposed deal to the defense last night, saying, look, you'll get the death penalty off the table if you agree to 4 consecutive life sentences back to back.
And remember, that's what Ann Taylor fought for a long time with delaying this case. Remember that. It was trying to get rid of that death penalty. And now essentially they've achieved that, probably part of this deal, and let's just send him to prison for the rest of his life. So, you know, Christie's saying, given all that, the defense attorney needs to do what's right for their client. So if it's a plea deal, it's on the table. She has to offer it to him. Exactly. Doesn't make it right? Doesn't make it right. But I mean, now we all know that he's going to come out and confess to this. I just think it's funny that it puts all these conspiracy theorists, these people that made channels for almost 3 years about drug connections, and it was a pack of gypsies that came in the area. There was aliens. I mean, we heard crazy shit. We heard absolute crazy shit about this.
10 years also on the burglary charge, waive all rights to appeal, which is big. You can't appeal. You'll be in prison for the rest of your life. And then prosecution will also seek restitution to pay for some of the funeral expenses. So that offer went out late last night on a Sunday night. And then it all happened very quickly today. We get the news that he accepted the deal and that the trial will not be happening. And now there will be this plea hearing on Wednesday.
You know, this has sort of rattled everybody following the case. It's certainly rattled the family. Steve Gonzalez, as I said, is coming up in just a moment to tell us what he's gone through over this last 3-4 days. And then today, he's got a lot to add to some of the public statements he said online. And so that is coming up. Brian, I opened the show by saying they had him dead to rights. And I feel as though when you and I watched bits and pieces come through the gag order over the last 2.5 years, we felt like it was impossible for Ann Taylor to climb that hill to reasonable doubt. Do you have any idea whether there'd been discussions throughout the last 2.5 years ever about getting to a plea deal?
Not that I know of. I have never heard one thing about a plea deal until Friday. That is when I found out that these discussions it started. Maybe they were happening in secret before. I believe that there was this negotiation happening behind the scenes between.
I mean, I think that I'm going to agree here with Brian Enton. I definitely feel that they had been talking about this for a long time, just trying to get him to confess, trying to get it out there and over.
The prosecution and the defense. I don't know how long it's been going on for, but you mentioned the evidence. I mean, there's so much, but I mean, his DNA was found on the knife sheath in the house where the murders happened. His Amazon history showed that he bought that K-bar knife used for the murders. The cell phone pings took him to the house over and over again and driving by the house. The surveillance video showed his car going up the drive. I mean, the evidence was a lot. But, you know, again, I told you this earlier, in some ways, just for those of us following it, I almost feel duped because not only has the prosecution sold this bill of goods that they were going to fight this till the end, but Ann Taylor, the same thing. I mean, she said openly in court that she personally believes that Bryan Kohberger is innocent. And now she also just, you know, basically is ready to sign on the dotted line. I don't think anybody saw this coming.
I will always say a defense attorney, has to believe in their client. They have to give them the most fulsome defense. That's America. Everybody gets equal justice. It's what makes us incredible. So I won't fault her for throwing her, full faith and trust into her client. But I will ask you this. Last week, there was a ruling that came down saying that Ann Taylor was no longer able to assert an alternative perpetrator theory in this trial, which would have meant that Bryan Kohberger,
telling you, the evidence here is so overwhelming against him. The evidence is so strong. And this is what I talked about at the beginning of all this. Everybody said, oh, there's no possible way. There's X, Y, Z. There's this. Like when they talk about evidence in a case, most of the time it's so minimal of things that are put out to the public, unless it's like the obvious evidence. But because of that gag order, because of all the sealed documents, we were only getting probably 10 or 20% of the evidence that really was in this. I'm telling you, there would have been so much other stuff that came out in this trial that we hadn't even heard of yet. And clearly, I mean, I think just Ann Taylor threw up the white flag on this and just said, I have no way that I'm going to be able to defend you on some of this shit. And here's the deal. I would take it. It's going to at least spare your life. All right, let's
could say, I think Joe Schmo, Jack Smith, and John Schmay all had evidence that showed they could have been in that house, which could amount to a little bit of reasonable doubt for a juror. They got smacked down. The judge said, you don't have enough evidence to raise those kinds of allegations against real people whose lives could be destroyed. Do you think, Bryan, that might have been the proverbial nail in this life without parole coffin? Meaning Anne looked at her client and said, Bryan, I can't save you now. I can't mount that defense. I can't save you. Make a decision, either yes or no. Take the deal, or you may end up in front of a firing squad.
It's possible. I mean, look, the 4 alternate perpetrators that she wanted to name, and we haven't reported the names. We know some of the names. I mean, these are people who the names came up early on. Even the judge said it's a bunch of BS. They were not the killer. So to think that she actually expected that was going to go her way and she was going to be able to bring those names up during the trial, I would suspect she knew that the judge was going to rule against her, because even early on, he said, you need more evidence here. This doesn't add up. She asked for a delay. That was denied. I wonder if she has been trying to perhaps convince Bryan Kohberger for some time to be open to a deal. Maybe he's the one who wanted to keep pushing forward, and she finally convinced him, like, we need to do this. But again, to my knowledge, there was no offer of a deal officially until Sunday night. So this all happened very, very quickly.
Do you have any idea if Bryan Kohberger's family is going to fly out from Pennsylvania either for Wednesday, where he has to stand up and break everybody's hearts, break his family's hearts, break the victims' families' hearts, and say, I did it. I killed each and, he'll have to say to each and every charge, I killed Kaylee Gonzalez. I killed Maddie Mogan.
Wow. What a moment.
I killed Xana Kernodle, and I killed Ethan Chapin using a knife. He's going to have to do that. Do you think that his family is going to come out and stand behind him for this?
I don't know. My gut says probably not, considering they have never been to Idaho to visit him in.
That is incorrect, because, and again, this is last night. So there's been some things that have been updated, and Kohberger's family is going to be there tomorrow. They will be there in court tomorrow. It's going to be crazy. I mean, to stand there with all the victim families, the Kohberger family is going to be there, and to watch this all unwrap is just going to be nuts. We'll be streaming it. We'll definitely be streaming it here.
Jail, and they have never been to any of the hearings in Idaho. Granted, I did see them in Pennsylvania after he was arrested, and they showed up for that. I've reported on in the past, there's financial issues there. This all happened so late. I mean, this hearing is the day after tomorrow, Ashley. Can they make plans that quickly? Can they afford a last-minute plane ticket? I mean, think about the victims' families. Like, they were getting ready for a 3-month trial starting at the beginning of August, and now they're told on a Sunday night something's happening, and then suddenly on Monday, oh, by the way, yes, it happened, and this is the hearing now going to happen on Wednesday. So, I mean, for both sides, this happened so quickly. I don't know that his family can really figure out the trip that fast.
Yeah. All right, Bryan, you've done incredible work, especially breaking this news. This is just so, I don't know, the whole earth just kind of tilted on its axis for those in the true crime community.
I'd say.
I really appreciate your hard work on this, and I know it's been a backbreakingly long day for you, so thank you.
Thanks, Ash.
He's a great reporter.
I want to bring in Steve Gonzalez.
All right, here we go.
He is the father of Kaylee Gonzalez. His attorney is Shannon Gray, who has stood by him steadfast from the beginning. Steve, I don't know what to say. You're the first person I thought of when I heard this news today. I reached out to you right away, first to tell you how sorry I was, because I know how this is landing. At least I think I do. But I wanted you to have your say. I wanted you to be able to say out loud for everyone to hear what this means to you and your family.
This is anything but justice. This is the opposite of our will. There was no majority believing that this was acceptable. I want to honor all the police officers, the FBI, and all the people that worked their tail off. The failure is at the court level, 100%. But the men in the boots on the ground and the women that were out there working, I want to honor everything that they did for our children, 100%. The fault is in leadership and the people that you place this evidence upon. They were weak. They decided to play God and decide what this man's decision should be, and not a jury, not a peers, not his peers. They, so that's where we are today.
Walk me through what happened. Brian Enton, did some really great reporting at the top of this show here, but tell me from your perspective how the last 3 days have played out.
I would say ever since Hitler's demanded an independent investigation, they couldn't get away from this case fast enough. They've done everything to make this case go away.
Wow.
So I don't know what that entails, but he said he was going to have an independent investigator, and all of a sudden we seemed like we were on rails to get rid of this case and make a plea deal. I mean, he's guilty. We all know he's guilty. There's more than enough evidence, but it's tough. It's tough to put a community through this, and it could be bad for reputations and business identities, and there's fallout. But this isn't the will of the victims. This is just one person making a decision, and it doesn't reflect what we were asking for.
Steve, did anybody ever call you from the prosecutor's office to just personally discuss this with you? Did anybody offer to meet with you in person to go over this potential plan?
We have meetings all the time on particularly a lot of times on Friday. No. We had this regular meeting that we have to try basically do an update of what's going on, where things are at, because Idaho is actually an amazing state where it really does care about people. We just get one or two, people who just don't care about the victims and don't care about justice. And it's easy to take the weight out. It's easy to make an excuse and say, I'm doing this for the victims, even though I've never interviewed the victims. I've never really talked to them to find out what their true feelings are. So here we are, we're stuck and we can't get out of it. I ask your audience, if anybody knows Judge Hitler, reach out to him and ask him to put his foot down and not accept this offer. It doesn't reflect anything in Idaho. This is not justice. We had an outsider come to our community, kill our kids in their sleep while they're getting a college education, doing everything that they should do, and we don't have the courage to hold him accountable. No plea deal. Let's go for this guy. 100%.
Listen, I get Steve's frustration here. Zero brain damage saying, he wanted death penalty. Absolutely. I absolutely want the death penalty as well, too. But, like Banfield made a great point in the beginning, you get some jurors on there, and Taylor plays a little magic here and says, well, what if, and maybe that sticks with the juror. They go back to vote. It's 11-1 and it's a hung jury. And then you got to go through this process over and over again. I mean, look at Karen Reed, two trials, lots of wasted time. But, it would be sad just to see that, something like that happen. So I don't know. Like, I get it. Like, I don't want this guy to live. I mean, he killed 4 innocent, kids, they're children trying to be college educated. Didn't do anything mean to anybody. Snuck in the middle of the night like Freddy Krueger and killed these kids for whatever reason that we may never find out. But it's like, like that's where I'm at with this. Like, yeah, he's in jail for the rest of his life, but yeah, he shouldn't live. So it's like, ugh, I'm kind of back and forth here. It's crazy. All right, let's go back to Steve here. I feel bad. He wanted this guy eliminated. Mazda Media saying, we Karen Reed supporters know it all too well. It's the truth. It is the truth. And he said, and those families, it could have been worse. The jury could have acquitted due to reasonable doubt. Yes. 100%. 100%. Oh, man, this is crazy. Here we go.
Let's do it. And that's how this family stands.
Steve, I know that, it's no secret your daughter Kaylee was so close with Maddie Mogen, best of friends. And I know that you got to know the Mogen family as well. Have you spoken with the Mogen family, and do you know what their reaction is to this plea decision?
We actually just had a meeting with the prosecution and just tore into it and made it clear that we were not in support of this, but we also invited other families into that, and I'll let them speak on their own that were part of that meeting, but we are in no way alone on this. Multiple families believe the same as we do, but I want to honor their abilities to speak independently and as their child.
Excuse me.
So I don't want to cross that line, but all I will say is there was no majority for this decision at all. And if they're not working for us, they're working against us, guys. I mean, we have to wake up to this. I mean, we have to hold people accountable. Coeur d'Alene just had a shooting where we attacked our firemen.
Yeah,
people need to stand up to these monsters and stop freaking bowing down to them and giving them childcare. I mean, prison is nothing but adult childcare. You get free vision, you get free dental, you get free meals, you get AC, room and board, cable TV, internet access. It's ridiculous what we give our prisoners. Better than what we treat our vets. Our vets coming back from war with
Steve, preach.
This is unacceptable.
Preach, Steve.
Shannon Gray, I'm going to ask you to step in as well. Judge Hippler, Steve just mentioned Judge Hippler in this case. I have to ask you as a matter of law, would Judge Hippler have been fully integrated into this deal plan? Meaning, this is not a surprise to Judge Hippler. Is he going to have to weigh this and then rule from the bench as to whether he'll accept it or not? Or is it a fait accompli by the time they get this far down the road that the judge will accept it?
Well, I think a few weeks ago, Judge Hippler, talked about had there been an offer at all on this case.
Closed
caption in the courtroom, and maybe that sparked something
on the bottom for Hippler is not translating well. So that is not my doing, and I just want to apologize to anybody for that name. When they mention Hitler, it's translating it as, and you saw the word up there. I don't want to say it, but so I do apologize.
In the prosecution, I'm not sure. That being said, with a plea like this, it's with the life sentences and it's agreed upon by the state and the defense. There's small modifications sometimes that they can make to the sentencing regarding, restitution, some other things like that. But if the state presents sufficient facts to the judge for a plea of guilty to the counts, normally judges will accept that, and they'll let the defense know if they're not going to accept that ahead of time. So I would just. It's
Hippler. It's P. It's not the other word. It's not the other word. So it's the closed captions picking it up as, the word we don't like to say, but it's Hippler, hip, like your hip, not hit, hip.
The fact that the plea will go through on Wednesday, and then, they'll settle for sentencing for a few weeks. And so the victims can be present to read victims' impact statements, et cetera.
So, Steve, I covered a case where the defendant was so overwhelmingly guilty according to the evidence, and it was a death penalty case in Arizona. And that jury voted guilty, and they did not vote for death penalty. So that defendant, Jodi Arias, sits in a prison in Arizona as we speak, and she had multiple access to appeals. I wonder if there's any solace at all in knowing that this can't happen to him at this point. There can be no appeal. There can be not one squeak from Bryan Kohberger after he accepts that sentence at the end of this month, much like, unlike what happened in Arizona, where there is always a chance the jury does not choose death. Is there any solace in the fact that you will at least have him silenced and there will be no appeals?
Absolutely zero. None. Could be no farther than how we believe. I want my community support. I want that jury to make the decision, not Thompson. Not some old man who's 70 freaking years old deciding how my daughter's life weighs in a courtroom. That is not justice. That is not justice at all. I'll take my juries. I'll take my peers all day long. I'm sick of one man deciding or one woman deciding what a life's worth. So that's how I stand on that.
I fully understand how you feel. And none of us can understand what you're going through. None of us is walking in your shoes. And I'm just glad to give you this platform to be able to say these things publicly. And I'm also glad that you've got the support of Shannon Gray, who's just been a rock for you. Thank you to the both of you. Steve, please give Christy and your kids our love. We will still be here. We'll be here Wednesday. We'll be here at the end of the month. And we'll be here for you after that as well.
Well, thank you. And you've always been a hard worker. And that's why we've always tried to partner with people who put that extra effort. But we couldn't pick the prosecution. We inherited them. But everywhere we go, we partner with people like you who are relentless and tireless, and they just chase down the truth. And I really appreciate that's what you brought to our case. And when people reach out to me, I'll tell them that this is a network that you can partner with and understand that they'll be there to the very end.
God bless you, Steve. I think we just lost Shannon, but I'm sending you my my deepest love and wishes for some peace in all of this, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Steve Gonzalez joining us, as well as Shannon Gray, who, like I said, we just lost his connection at the very end there.
Wow.
We certainly got the comments that we needed from Steve's attorney. After the break, there's another member of the Gonzalez family, the youngest sister, who wrote something so incredibly profound that my 38 years as a journalist, I don't think I could have written. I wanted to read a couple of those lines for you from Aubrey Gonzalez, Kaylee's little sister, because it is just, I mean, it's just it's earth-shattering that she could come up with these incredible concepts in such a time of despair. And then also I'm going to speak with Mark Garagos, who's been through his fair share of very, very high-profile trials, and he knows the way the inner workings are. Like, do these adversarial parties, prosecutor, defense, are they so adversarial when the doors close to the courtroom? Or do they talk about things like this? That's coming up right after this.
A criminal complaint was filed yesterday here in Latah County, charging the defendant, Mr. Kohberger, with 4 counts of first-degree murder, in addition to felony burglary, which involves entering the residence with the intent to commit the crime of murder. As far as Mr. Kohberger, I can share with you that he is a graduate student at Washington State University and has an apartment residence over in Pullman. He has had an initial appearance in front of a judge in Pennsylvania. He is being held without bond, and the warrant from our magistrate judge here also provides for no bond. We understand that he's scheduled to be back in court in Pennsylvania next Tuesday afternoon, and that a public defender has been appointed for him there. The process at this point is, since he was arrested in another state, he has the opportunity to either waive extradition and return voluntarily to the state of Idaho, or if he prefers not to waive extradition, then we will initiate extradition proceedings through our governor's office.
Crazy.
We are back with this breaking news on the plea deal for Bryan Kohberger in the Idaho quadruple murder case, 2.5 years in and just 30 days, basically, till jury selection. My colleague, Bryan Enton, who broke this story, is back with me live, as is Mark Garagos, who is one of the best attorneys in the business and has been through his share of high-profile cases.
Oh, I'm going to say, yeah, but I prefer Alan Jackson. So.
Bryan, I want to start with you real quickly because you've got some reporting for me about what the prosecutors outlined to the families as their rationale for why this deal should go forward.
Yeah, I want to go through this list with you, Ashley, and kind of explain these different bullet points that they gave to the families about why they were supporting this plea deal. So they started with every trial, there's always risks. As we conveyed, we feel very confident about the strength of the state's case. However, this does not eliminate all risks associated with trial. They talked about mistrial, hung jury, and the fact that this could result in the families having to go through the process again. They also said a month-long jury trial will impose an emotional, mental, financial, and physical toll on the families, friends, roommates of the victims without any certainty of an outcome. There would be some measure of finality if the defendant admits he was guilty of the murders. There is only one realistic way to get this type of closure, and that is through his entry of a guilty plea. So basically, they were saying if the trial moved forward and he was pleading not guilty, they would have never gotten the satisfaction of a guilty plea. And this was interesting. They said that, sadly, as many have experienced, there are individuals out there who believe in conspiracy theories about this case, believe the defendant to be innocent or support the defendant in some way. We know the sentiments of support of defendants have been unbearable. We can only hope that at least some of these people will turn their attention to other matters if the defendant takes responsibility and admits to his heinous crimes by pleading guilty. And the last two reasons they gave, or the last reason they gave, the state believes the death penalty is.
Yeah, I mean, this was, we talked about this last night with Nan, and I said, you know, zero brain damage says, so does he go into solitary or general? I mean, the thing that you got to look at is he's so high profile. He's so high profile. So you got to look at, you know, there's got to be some type of, which is really weird, some protection for him, because I'm sure people are going to want to come after him being so high profile. And if they end this guy, you know, hey, I got that kind of on my, notch that on my bedpost, because look at Jeffrey Dahmer. That's, I mean, he wasn't in prison very long, I think a year or 2 years, and someone got to him and blasted him out. So it remains to be seen. It's going to really remains to be seen. So I think he's going to be in solitary because of his profile nature. Someone's going to want to clip him. And you got to think about it too. You know, yeah, these weren't underage kids, but they were kids. They were young, 18, 19, 20 years old. So take that into account. You know, someone will look for that. So, all right, let's keep playing here.
In this case, we've never wavered in that. However, they talked about how people can remain on death row for 30 or 40 years, which has happened in Idaho. There would be appeals, and that this would just drag on and on for the families. Ashley?
Mark Garagos, Bryan Enton just listed out some very strong reasons for why a plea deal is a great idea. And if you're Steve Gonzalez, the state had this guy. They had him dead to rights. They had overwhelming bad facts that, I mean, I don't know that Ann Taylor could have climbed that Everest with every tool in the toolbox. Why a plea deal for a case that looked this rock solid?
And by the way, he looks like a chick there. Coffee Cake says, I totally believe that he should stand up, explain everything in every freaking detail. And that, and then he should just say at the very end, here's the weapon. I lost my head and I don't know how this happened. I'm just curious, like, where's the knife? We're never going to find out where the knife was. He's never going to give that up. I would be shocked if he gave all that up. I would be shocked if he gave all that up. But you know, those are the all the unanswered questions. You know, where's the murder weapon? You know, where's the murder weapon? Where'd you put it? Where'd you throw it? I think it's the Snake River somewhere. All right, let's play.
You know, it shows you how jaded I suppose I am. I didn't understand why they took the plea deal, the defense. I don't get it. I mean, this is somebody, that was my first reaction. I know that may not be a popular reaction, but what's the advantage of him taking a plea deal to life without and no chance of appeal when it's a circumstantial case? Number one. Number two, the reasons the prosecutor gave here are compelling. I don't know. I've never had a trial where both the victims and the accused families hasn't said, how do you do this for a living? How do you go through a trial like this? Trials are not easy. Trials are some of the most stressful, unbelievably nerve-wracking things you could ever go through.
Yeah.
And the idea of having a defendant get up, plead guilty, accept responsibility, say, I'm not going to appeal, waive my right to appeal, and all he gets is he's not going to sit on death row for 30 years or until such time as the death penalty may be eliminated, as it is in many states. I get the raw emotion. I get that. And I understand nobody's going to second guess anybody who's had the unthinkable happen to them. So I understand that.
Yeah.
That may not be part of this. I mean, it just might be you stand up, you confess, you say, I killed these 4 students, Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, and Maddie, and that's it. Maybe that's all he's going to have to do. And I accept I accept this, I am the person that did this, just something short and sweet. We may never get all the ultimate details, but it would be really great. It would be really great if we did. We want to know. We definitely want to know. Let's see. Coffee Cake says, thanks for shouting me out. I'm really sorry. I really thought the guy was 100% innocent and thought he got caught up in the wrong time. And that's how I thought this would happen. Listen, I understand. I really understand. And I think with Karen's case, if you watched Karen read, my 2 years of Karen's case here on this channel, it opened the doors to a lot of police corruption. But you have to understand that Karen's case was very, how do I word it? And believe me, this stuff happens. It happens a lot. But Karen's case was just such a certain circumstances in ways that things lined up and how it all unfolded. And not every case is like that. Yes, there are some that do happen that way. But I think with that, and then now getting it exposed and looking how dirty law enforcement is, and believe me, there's dirty law enforcement in tons of cases. But and that's why, again, following the evidence in her case, it didn't make sense. Things didn't add up. And when you follow the evidence in this case, clearly things added up. And look, now he's come forward and saying, I did it. Because probably his attorney, Ann Taylor, said, I have no way to stand up and present a defense when all this compounding evidence comes in. I may not be able to defend against that, explain it away. And she tried hard. The IgG, the DNA, tried using this alibi, driving around. He was stargazing, tried quoting laws from 1775, did her job. Granted, I think she wasted a lot of fucking time, but did her job as a defense attorney. And some of the things that she argued was asinine, ridiculous. Delay. And that's why I kept saying, to you people, if this guy and her team is so sure that he didn't do this, then why are you delaying this thing almost 3 fucking years? Go to trial. Let the Commonwealth, I'm saying Commonwealth because I just went through 2 years of the Commonwealth. The state embarrassed themselves with their evidence, just like they did in the Karen Reed case. The Commonwealth, you're delaying it for a reason, because you don't know how you're going to explain in your defense. And granted, they don't even have to. They don't have to get up and defend. But I'm just saying, to counteract what the state is putting out there, she didn't have a way. And there was probably some pretty fucking damning evidence in there that we haven't heard about. Maybe they do have the murder weapon and they never put it out there with his fucking fingerprints and his handprints all over it. We don't know. And I hope we do find things out. So here we go. Let's keep playing here. Great conversation tonight.
Please, why go through this just to have a jury say the same thing and then have to listen? If you're the guy, let me tell you what ended up happening. You get to a guilty verdict in that phase. You then get to a penalty phase, and you have to listen to mitigation evidence. If you were the victim at that point, and that's a legal conclusion, the victim, because
and to Lori's point here, and I'm sorry I didn't bring up my screen again, and I will. Lori's asking, do you think that he asked for a plea deal to protect his family? And I talked about this in the very beginning of the show. Yeah, I think maybe he had to have that hard conversation with them and say, look, you know what? I don't think it's going to be worth to go through trial. I don't want you to hear what came out. Maybe he's never told his family the whole story and he doesn't want it to come out in front of them. So to protect them for all the criticism and everything they're going to get, and believe me, they're going to get a lot of it, but to minimize some of that, to come out and take this plea deal and say, you know what, I will take blame for this. Don't push anything on my family. Come after me if you're going to yell at me. And, most likely, like I said, he just didn't want this full story to play out in front of his family. He didn't want them to know all the intimate details in this. And they would have came out. So great question. All right, let's share my screen again here. Here we go.
If somebody's been found guilty, you don't want to hear a litany of mitigation evidence about somebody who has been found guilty of killing your loved one.
There you go.
I can't think of anything worse. I don't want to hear about all the good things or all the problems or this or that. I just want the person gone. And I think there is some closure with somebody standing up and taking responsibility. And I think that with some hindsight and I remember, Ashley, you tell me when we first talked about this, some of the victims' families were on your show saying that they were not supportive of the death penalty. So I'll leave it at that.
There are some who said it did not matter to the level it did to others. It seemed with victims' family members that there were more that did. But Mark, I'm so appreciative of you jumping on with me last minute for the breaking news. Thank you. I'm going to call you again on this because this is definitely not over. And Bryan Enton, I'm going to ask you to stay because there's still lots of work I have ahead, questions I have for you as well. There's this notion after the break that I'm going to dig into the protocols because I want to know if he's got to stand up in court and tell us what happened. What did you do to those kids?
Right.
Tell us, because we've been under gag order all these years. Is it time for Bryan Kohberger to not just say he's guilty, but what he did and why he did it? I'm going to find out if the law demands that in Idaho. The expert in Idaho protocols is coming up in just a moment. But also, Stacy and Jim Chapin are the parents of Ethan Chapin. And Mark Garagos just mentioned they weren't all on board for a death penalty. Here's part of the interview that I did with them many months ago.
For us and our family, personally, he was kind of the comedian. He could lighten any family situation.
Yeah, he was good.
He was funny. He was kind.
Yeah.
He just kept us all moving forward. I don't know. He
loved his family, his friends. He just loved to be with everybody and just have a good time.
Yeah.
I mean, he's pretty easygoing. He just loved life.
Sad.
There are likely some defensive wounds, but No, there just were a lot of stab wounds. And so, I mean, you know, it was late at night or early in the morning. So it seems likely that maybe they were sleeping.
That was an interview that shocked me.
That's the question, Lori. You know, I don't know. What is going to be the detail of what he's going to have to say? You know, I went in the house, I stabbed these four victims. I mean, we don't know. It might just be something very basic. I take responsibility. I did the crime. We may not have to hear the intimate details. Like, we were talking about BTK earlier. It came up in the chat. He had to give full details as part of his confession. So I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know. So here we go.
After the murders of 4 University of Idaho students, I spoke with the coroner who told me about the depth of the stab wounds, who told me about details it was just sort of bone chilling to hear what had happened to those 4 kids. She won't be testifying. Nobody will be. No one will be testifying, but I sure hope that Bryan Kohberger has to stand up and make an allocution explaining to us why. What did you do to these 4 kids and why? Not every state operates the same way. I've seen allocutions before, like Dennis Rader's that, rose the hair on the back of my neck. But others, Chris Watts, I mean, he said a few things about the kids that he killed, his own kids, his wife, but not all the details, not all of them. I want to bring in Edwina Alcock. She is an attorney in Idaho. She knows the protocols in that state. That is her state, and this is a state case. And Brian Enton is still here with me as well to fill in a lot of the gaps. I've got you still here, Brian. I know it's breaking news, and I'm sorry to keep you, but I'm going to ask you a question in a moment. Edwina, can you tell me about the protocol for a circumstance like this? Start with Wednesday, the day that the plea is going to be changed from not guilty to guilty. What should we expect to see happen on Wednesday? What will we hear from Bryan Kohberger on that day?
Sure. Thank you, Ashley. I think that what we can anticipate in this case is the judge is not going to accept any type of skirting around the elements of this crime.
Wow.
Unfortunately, what is going to be required is Mr. Kohberger pleading guilty to the elements of the murders of each of these 4 kids. And I hate to use the words kids because they're obviously adults, but we know that they're just, university students on the cusp of their life. And I think the court is going to require and not accept anything other than Mr. Kohberger telling the court exactly what happened in this case.
But I don't expect that Wednesday. Do you expect that much of an allocution on Wednesday, or do you expect to hear those kinds of details during sentencing at the end of July?
If the court is going to accept a guilty plea on Wednesday, Bryan Kohberger is going to have to tell the court exactly what he did to be guilty of this crime. So I do expect that on Wednesday, unless there was an Alford plea, which I cannot anticipate the state agreeing to in this case.
That.
But if the court is going to accept a plea, he's going to have to tell the court what he did.
Wow.
And Brian Enton, if you could just weigh in very quickly, this has all been very last minute for the families.
And again, remember, this is an Idaho lawyer. This is someone in that state. So Hippler might put his foot down on this and say, okay, we're going to take the plea, but we want all the intimate details. Wow. This is going to be tomorrow. You're going to want to come over to the LTL media channel and and watch this hearing live. I'm going to be reacting to it live and playing it here live on the channel. This is going to be huge. A lot of people are going to be watching this tomorrow, and I appreciate if you come over and watch this. Everybody in the chat, wow, indeed. Rhonda saying wow. Rachel saying wow. Yeah, I think it's going to be crazy. And definitely, a lot of people are going to must watch TV. People are going to watch this. All right, here we play.
And so they haven't even got 48 hours at this point to put together their statements, their victims' impact statements. I mean, where did they tell you they were at with this process? Even arriving, even going to the hearing on Wednesday.
Well, and just to respond to what Edwina said, I have been told that the prosecution said that they would not accept an Alford plea. And what an Alford plea is, and Edwina can correct me if I'm wrong, she's the lawyer here, but the way I understand it, an Alford plea would have been a plea where he would have pled guilty, gotten life, but he wouldn't have actually admitted to committing the murders. And I am told that the prosecution would not.
Oh, wait, Brian Enton is reporting, and let me get this out. Brian Enton's reporting an hour ago a statement from the Kohberger family. A statement from the Kohberger family. It says, quote, in light of the recent developments, the Kohbergers are asking members of the media for privacy, respect, and responsible judgment during this time. We will continue to allow our legal process to unfold with respect to all parties. We will not release any comments or take any questions. We ask that you respect our wishes during a difficult time for all those affected. Wow. Let's see if there's any other breaking news here. The heat right now in Boise is crazy, and it comes from a Florida man. Let's see. For the first time, Bryan Kohberger's professor and advisor, Dr. Kathleen Ramsland, who is a serial killer expert, will now talk with me about the former student at 10. Wow. Now she's speaking out because she was a witness. She could not talk, but now she can. And I got a lot of questions. Kohberger's family will be at the hearing tomorrow. Let's see. I'm trying to get a definitive time on it. That's the thing. I think it's 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have my stream set up for 1 p.m. But if anything slides or changes, I'll definitely make that adjustment. I think it's 1 p.m. Eastern. Debbie says it's 1 p.m. Eastern. So I have my stream set up for 12:45 Eastern. I might go a little bit earlier. But, I'm going to keep my eyes on this, and I'm definitely going to be streaming it tomorrow. All right, let's go back to Banfield. What a great episode last night. Very informative. And we'll play this out. And again, I had Nan Gallagher in studio last night. Before I go, if you haven't seen that stream, we talked for 2 hours about Kohberger as this broke. And I'll drop that link in the chat before this ends so you can go back and watch that as well. All right, back to Banfield.
Accept that kind of a plea. It needed to be just a flat out, I did it, I'm taking full responsibility plea. So I don't think Alfred plea is on the table, but I guess we'll find out for sure on Wednesday. In terms of the timing, I mean, I think these families were getting ready for a trial in August and emotionally gearing up for that. And now to know that they have to figure out a way to get to Boise in 2 days and face the man who is admitting to killing their kids. And I told you this earlier, Ashley. One family member told me, and this just like really hit me the way she described it, that she had been working for 2.5 years to get her power back, like to take the power away from Bryan Kohberger and to feel empowered again. And that she felt like when the prosecution gave Kohberger the option of either taking the plea or going to trial, that he somehow had all the power again now. And that was the most devastating thing for her. And I think that just gives you an eye into sort of how these families are processing this right now.
I can't even imagine what it's like to walk in their shoes. Edwina Alcox, thank you for stepping in last minute on this breaking news. Bryan Enton, as always, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your work, and it is just stellar. You are among the giants, I believe, in this industry. Thank you for that. Reporter. In just a moment, Brian's going to come back, and I'm going to give you the lowdown, the schedule, not just Wednesday, but the sentencing schedule, and then I'm going to remember the 4 most important people in this story. The 4 kids.
What if there's any new documents? Let's take a look. Why we kind of get through this commercial break. I'm going to see if there's any documents that have been released in Brian's case. Let's see. Anything
I'm still
today?
trying to get my head around it, but in a matter of 2 days, Bryan
Kohberger. We have a yesterday a notice of hearing. Here we go. Let me share my screen. I should have probably done this before I went live, but I was so ready to get on this live stream and talk about this. So in the District Court of the 4th Judicial District of the state of Idaho, hopefully you all can see my screen. Perfect, you can. It says State of Idaho plaintiff versus Bryan C. Kohberger defendant. Notice is given that the above entitled case is set for July 2nd, 2025 at 11 a.m. That's Central Time. So that would put me at, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let's see, the Ida County Courthouse. And let's see, I certify that on this date to serve a copy of the attached to. So it is a notice of hearing. There's another document here, an order of approval. Let's share this. This is for order approving pool still photographer. Don't even tell me that they're not going to fucking put this on TV. You've got to be kidding me. The court received multiple requests by various media outlets to video record the change of plea hearings scheduled for Wednesday, July 2nd. A live stream of the proceeding will be provided by the court. Great. On its social media streaming account. Therefore, various requests by media outlets to independently video record the proceeding are denied. Okay, so this will be live streamed. It will be live streamed. Ah, yes, 12 Eastern. That was my bad fuzzy math. So I'll set my stream up now. Let me change my time. Thank you for that. So we're going to go at 11:45. So I'm pretty sure that Court TV is going to have this. Lauren Crime will have it. This is huge. We go back to the order. To ensure the quality still images are available for the hearing, the court will permit a pooled still photographer to be present of the hearing. The Associated Press have been first to request still photography access. Okay. And Judge Hippler is going to allow that. All right, let's go back to Banfield. Here we go.
Is going to stand up in an Idaho courtroom and tell us all what we all pretty much thought all this time, that he did it, that he's guilty of murdering four kids in Idaho.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I just my time.
In the prime of their lives. Bryan Enton is back with me now. Bryan, I was hoping you could give me the schedule. Give me an outlook for Wednesday for this, plea change, and then for the sentencing at the end of July.
Yeah, so we know the plea hearing is going to be Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. exactly. I heard what Edwina said, which I thought was interesting, that she thinks we might get like a really detailed confession. I don't know that. I don't know if it's going to be sort of procedural or if there'll be a lot of information that comes out. I don't know, but it's Wednesday, 11 a.m. And then the sentencing, I'm told, will be later in July. What's interesting, though, which is no surprise, just sort of the way this case has gone, is the official docket hasn't been updated yet. The court hasn't sent anything out. This is all information we're still getting through sources.
All right, so Alford plea is a guilty plea in which a defendant maintains their innocence but admits to the prosecution's evidence would likely result in a guilty verdict if brought to trial. Is a clear example of Alford was the West Memphis 3 that got them out of prison, but they will be on record as guilty for the rest of their lives, even though they're saying we did not commit this crime. And another Alford plea that is pretty famous as well is if you go watch The Staircase on Netflix, Michael Peterson, after spending, I think, 8 or 10 years in prison and ultimately having some evidence that come forward that basically rendered him not, that caused his case to be reheard on appeal for really one last time. He ended up taking an Alford plea through the prosecution and was able to get out of prison as well, too. So let's see. LTL Boise's 2 hours behind us. All right. What time do I need on this ring? 1 or 12? So I was right. Gosh. So confused. So I was right. It's 12:45. I had it set up for 12:45. All right, let's get back to Banfield here.
Close to the trial that we have. So I'm still waiting on the official sort of docket change, which hasn't happened yet.
Bryan, thank you. You're going to join me in the next hour. I'm going to end this hour by showing 4 pictures of the people who matter most in this case. And those are the victims of who Bryan Kohberger will say he's guilty of murdering: Ethan, Madison, Xana, and Kaylee.
Wow.
I'll be back with you in just minutes.
Wild, wild, wild.
Welcome back, everyone, to our breaking news coverage. I'm Ashley Banfield, and yes, it is late. It is not normal for me to be on at this hour, but there is such a seismic shift in the true crime community because Bryan Kohberger has agreed to plead guilty after more than 2.5 years of us waiting and wondering, did he do it? If he did do it, why did he do it? The murder of 4 innocent University of Idaho students murdered in their beds. Again, almost 3 years ago now. We've been waiting under gag order for the most part for answers. And those answers were supposed to come during a trial that was set to get underway in just a month. Why did these 4 innocent kids lose their lives? Who is this guy to them? Why would he choose them if he did it? And why on earth would anyone break into a home of sleeping innocent kids and knife them to death in their beds? All of these answers were supposed to be coming to us at the end of this month and beginning of August. Now, I'm not so sure. I wish I could come on the air tonight and tell you exactly what's going to happen. Best guess, after almost 40 years of doing this job, is that, yeah, you're going to get some answers. Bryan Kohberger doesn't just get to say, all right, I did it, now leave me alone. It doesn't work that way. He has to do something called an allocution. That's typically what happens. When somebody agrees that they're guilty, they have to tell us why. They have to tell us what they did. A couple things are about to happen. On Wednesday of this week, Kohberger is going to be marched into court, more than likely in an orange jumpsuit, because there's no verdict now that's going to be rendered on him from a jury of dispassionate citizens, right? Now it doesn't matter if you see him looking guilty in an orange jumpsuit or in his fancy little suit and tie. That's my guess. My guess is that he will come into court in an orange jumpsuit, and he will be asked to stand in front of Judge Hippler and plead guilty to each and every one of the murders, as well as the burglary. And he will have to answer to what he did to each of these kids and why he's guilty of it. As for the details, the very perplexing details as to why he chose these 4, that I can't promise you will happen on Wednesday. That I'm not sure will happen on Wednesday. At some point, we will hear more details. My thought is it would be likely better reserved until sentencing, when there's a more formal process, when, you know, family members can actually book tickets and hotels to be in this jurisdiction and be present for it. It's 48 hours away, for Pete's sake, not even. They barely even heard about this before they suddenly have to scramble to be present for it. So Wednesday is the change in plea, where he will formally admit to stringing us all along for almost 3 years. And he will admit that he's guilty of these 4 murders. Whether he allocutes and tells us more details, I don't know. But then there will be the sentencing at the end of July. And at that point, I believe we're going to learn a lot more. And at that point, you will hear that Bryan Kohberger has agreed to this deal. And in return, he will go to prison for life with 4 consecutive life sentences. Why 4 consecutive? You die after 1. Why do you need the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in a row? Well, in case something falls through. Maybe there's a hitch. Maybe something goes wrong in one of the murders. Doubtful, but you still have the next one, and 3 after that. So he will do 4 consecutive life sentences. He will not have the ability to get parole ever. It's called toe tag parole in my line of work. It means you come out of that prison in a pine box with a tag on your toe, and you do not come out of that prison any other way. Toe tag parole for him. He also has to waive the right to an appeal, which means you cannot bother us anymore with your excuses. You cannot make any more excuses for this. You cannot tie up the courts. You cannot tie up the emotions of the victims' family members who were left behind. You need to go away and die at your own rate in a cell. This is the agreement he's made. Bryan Kohberger will go to prison for life with no opportunity for parole, with no opportunity to ever appeal this. And for that, he doesn't face the firing squad or an electric chair or a needle. More than likely the firing squad, because that's what Idaho has been working towards. It's seismic. I told you it's seismic, because the families, they really didn't know this was coming. They were part of the process, but only for the last few days. And that's where Brian Entin comes in. My colleague, News Nation's national correspondent, Brian Entin, you broke this story. You have been monitoring this all the way along. And even though it's happening, it's still really hard to process.
It is, and I've said it over and over again all day. I never thought that there would be a plea deal. People would ask me all the time. I never thought. I thought there was going to be a trial. That was the indication I always got from the prosecution. That was the feeling I got from being at pretty much every single court hearing. But that started to change on Friday, when there was a meeting with the victims' families, and for the first time that I knew of, there was this talk of what would you think about a plea deal. And then over the weekend, more chatter, and they actually the prosecution extended the offer to the defense on Sunday night, so last night, and then the defense accepted it and said, we will take this deal. Death is now off the table, life in prison, no opportunity for parole, no opportunity to appeal. But it all happened very, very fast, Ashley.
And overwhelming for many of the surviving family members. And let's not also forget, Brian, there are 2 surviving roommates who were there. Extraordinarily traumatizing for them to not only have lived through these last 2.5+ years, but the advent of having to get up on the stand in a very public trial in front of the eyes of the world and tell their traumatic experiences. They also more than likely had a say in this process, but the family members were not all in lockstep. I dare say the majority of them very much against a plea deal.
Yes, I mean, there are some that we know of who have been open to a plea deal in life behind bars, but for the most part, the conversations that I have had, the families wanted to see this through. They wanted to see the prosecution take this to the end. They felt that Bryan Kohberger deserved the death penalty, and they feel like there has been this negotiation between the defense and the prosecution happening almost in secret. Like the fact that this all took this turn over the weekend and the families didn't know that this was brewing before Friday. And I was just thinking about something else, Ashley, this court date of Wednesday. So now on Wednesday of this week, there is this official court date that the families were told about when the plea will happen in court. To me, that shows that the judge is in on it. I mean, it hasn't officially it showed up on the court system on the computer, but if the judge has set the court date, he's obviously been a part of these conversations and acknowledged that there's a deal on the table.
With something this high profile, I cannot imagine that it didn't go before the judge already. They can formally put it on the record on Wednesday, but why set this all up to fail on Wednesday and devastate everybody all over again? And when I say everybody, I mean the victims' family members all over again. So I'm not surprised that the judge wouldn't sort of be involved and say, all right, let's go ahead with this. Let's make it formal. Let's have him confess in court and tell us that he did it to each one of these kids. He's got 4 charges, 1 for each of them, and each of them is just as important as the other. Real quickly, did you tell me that Bryan Kohberger's family has never visited him in prison these 2.5 years that he's been in Idaho? They're all the way over in Pennsylvania. Have they never seen him?
Yeah, unless it was a recent visit, my reporting has always been based on sources that I have that they have not visited him in person in Idaho, that there have been phone calls and letters, but never an in-person visit. They have never been at any of the, I've been at, I think every hearing. They've not been to any of the hearings in Idaho. They were there. The one time I've seen Bryan Kohberger's parents were right after his arrest in Pennsylvania. They came to his first hearing there and sort of shuffled in, and then they brought them out the back. But no, they have never been to Idaho.
Wow.
Well, he can get used to not having them visit even more because he's going to do that time in Idaho. And unless they move across the country, he will not be seeing his family. If they haven't seen him in the last 2.5, I can't imagine in 4 consecutive life sentences that they'll be regular visitors. Bryan, don't go away. I wanted to let our viewers know that in the last hour, if you were watching, I had the opportunity to do the first national interview with Steve Gonsalves, who has been a vocal opponent to any kind of plea deal. He and his wife, Christy, and their kids have been steadfast in their desire to see Bryan Kohberger, if found guilty, face a firing squad for the murders of these 4 kids. I had a chance to speak with him and his attorney, Shannon Gray, in the last hour. I want to replay that for you. Steve Gonsalves. He is the father of Kaylee Gonsalves. His attorney is Shannon Gray, who has stood by him steadfast from the beginning. Steve, you know, I don't know what to say. You're the first person I thought of when I heard this news today. I reached out to you right away, first to tell you how sorry I was, because I know how this is landing, at least I think I do. But I wanted you to have your say. I wanted you to be able to say out loud for everyone to hear what this means to you and your family.
This is anything but justice. This is the opposite of our will. There was no majority believing that this was acceptable. I want to honor all the police officers, the FBI, and all the people that worked their tail off. The failure is at the court level, 100%. But the men in the boots on the ground and the women that were out there working, I want to honor everything that they did for our children. 100%. The fault is in leadership and the people that you place this evidence upon. They were weak. They decided to play God and decide what this man's decision should be, and not a jury, not a peers, not his peers. They, you know. So that's where we are today.
Walk me through what happened. Brian Enton, you know, did some really great reporting at the top of the show here, but tell me from your perspective how the last 3 days have played out.
I would say ever since Hippler's demanded an independent investigation, they couldn't get away from this case fast enough. They've done everything to make this case go away. So I don't know what that entails, but he said he was going to have an independent investigator, and all of a sudden we seemed like we were on rails to get rid of this case and make a plea deal. I mean, he's guilty. We all know he's guilty. There's more than enough evidence, but it's tough. It's tough to put a community through this, and it could be bad for reputations and business identities, and there's fallout. But this isn't the will of the victims. This is just one person making a decision, and it doesn't reflect what we were asking for.
Steve, did anybody ever call you from the prosecutor's office to just personally discuss this with you? Did anybody offer to meet with you in person to go over this potential plan?
We have meetings all the time particularly a lot of times on Friday. No. We have this regular meeting that we have to try basically do an update of what's going on, where things are at, because Idaho is actually an amazing state where it really does care about people. We just get one or two, people who just don't care about the victims and don't care about justice. And it's easy to take the weight out. It's easy to make an excuse and say, I'm doing this for the victims, even though I've never interviewed the victims. I've never really talked to them to find out what their true feelings are. So here we are, we're stuck and we can't get out of it. I ask your audience, if anybody knows Judge Hippler, reach out to him and ask him to put his foot down and not accept this offer. It doesn't reflect anything in Idaho. This is not justice. We had an outsider come to our community, kill our kids in their sleep while they're getting a college education, doing everything that they should do, and we don't have the courage to hold him accountable. No plea deal. Let's go for this guy. 100%. Let's do it. And that's how this family stands.
Steve, I know that, it's no secret your daughter Kaylee was so close with Maddie Mogen, best of friends. And I know that you got to know the Mogen family as well. Have you spoken with the Mogen family, and do you know what their reaction is to this plea decision?
We actually just had a meeting with the prosecution and just tore into it. And
wow.
Made it clear that we were not in support of this, but we also invited other families into that, and I'll let them speak on their own that were part of that meeting, but we are in no way alone on this. Multiple families believe the same as we do, but I want to honor their abilities to speak independently and as their child. So I don't want to cross that line, but all I will say is there was no majority for this decision at all. And if they're not working for us, they're working against us, guys. I mean, we have to wake up to this. I mean, we have to hold people accountable. Coeur d'Alene just had a shooting where we attacked our firemen. People need to stand up to these monsters and stop freaking bowing down to them and giving them childcare. I mean, prison is nothing but adult childcare. You get free vision, you get free dental, you get free meals, you get AC, room and board, cable TV, internet access. It's ridiculous what we give our prisoners. Better than what we treat our vets. Our vets coming back from war with missing limbs. This is unacceptable.
Shannon Gray, I'm going to ask you to step in as well. Judge Hippler, Steve just mentioned Judge Hippler in this case. I have to ask you as a matter of law, would Judge Hippler have been fully integrated into this deal plan? Meaning, this is not a surprise to Judge Hippler. Is he going?
Real quick, I'm just reading a quote from Aubrey Gonzalez. She says, quote, introducing, and she's the youngest of the family, says introducing of the plea deal just weeks before the scheduled trial is both shocking and cruel. The youngest member of Aubrey Gonzalez, the youngest member of the family, wrote in a letter shared on Facebook, quote, Bryan Kohberger facing life in prison means he'll still get to speak, form relationships, and engage with the world. Meanwhile, our loved ones have been silenced forever. Jeez. In another statement released Tuesday, the Gonzalez family said they will not stop fighting for the life that was stolen unjustly. We stand strong that it was not over until a plea is accepted, they wrote. At bare minimum, pleas require a full confession, full accountability, location of the murder weapon, confirmation the defendants acted alone, and the true facts of what happened that night. They deserve that. Wow. This is going to be a very powerful moment tomorrow. All right, let's finish up with Banfield here.
Going to have to weigh this and then rule from the bench as to whether he'll accept it or not? Or is it a fait accompli by the time they get this far down the road that the judge will accept it?
Well, I think a few weeks ago, Judge Hippler, talked about had there been an offer at all on this case. I think he mentioned it in the courtroom, and maybe that sparked something with the defense and the prosecution. I'm not sure. That being said, with a plea like this, it's with the life sentences and it's agreed upon by the state and the defense. There's small modifications sometimes that they can make to the sentencing regarding, restitution, some other things like that. But if the state presents sufficient facts to the judge or a plea of guilty to the counts, normally judges will accept that, and they'll let the defense know if they're not going to accept that ahead of time. So I would suspect that the plea will go through on Wednesday, and then they'll settle for sentencing for a few weeks, and so the victims can be present to read victims' impact statements, etc. So
yeah, wow.
So, Steve, I covered a case where the defendant was so overwhelmingly guilty according to the evidence, and it was a death penalty case in Arizona, and that jury voted guilty, and they did not vote for death penalty. So that defendant, Jodi Arias, sits in a prison in Arizona as we speak, and she had multiple access to appeals. I wonder if there's any solace at all in knowing that this can't happen to him at this point. There can be no appeal. There can be not one squeak from Bryan Kohberger after he accepts that sentence at the end of this month, unlike what happened in Arizona, where there is always a chance the jury does not choose death. Is there any solace in the fact that you will at least have him silenced and there will be no appeals?
Absolutely zero. None. Could be no farther than how we believe. I want my community support. I want that jury to make the decision, not Thompson, not some old man who's 70 freaking years old deciding how my daughter's life weighs in a courtroom. That is not justice. That is not justice at all. I'll take my juries, I'll take my peers all day long. I'm sick of one man deciding or one woman deciding what a life's worth. So that's how I stand on that.
Wow.
I fully understand how you feel. And wow. None of us can understand what you're going through. None of us is walking in your shoes. And I'm just glad to give you this platform to be able to say these things publicly. And I'm also glad that you got the support of Shannon Gray, who's just been a rock for you. Thank you to the both of you. Steve, please give Christy and your kids our love. We will still be here. We'll be here Wednesday. We'll be here at the end of the month. And we'll be here for you after that as well.
Well, thank you. And you've always been a hard worker. And that's why we've always tried to partner with people who put that extra effort. But we couldn't pick the prosecution. We inherited them. But everywhere we go, we partner with people like you who are relentless and tireless, and they just chase down the truth. And I really appreciate that's what you brought to our case. And when people reach out to me, I'll tell them that this is a network that you can partner with, and understand that they'll be there to the very end.
You know, it's just crazy. You know, you sit here and I think of all these conspiracy channels that came after and attacked the Gonsalves family throughout, you know, almost close to 3 years, you know, saying that they knew about all this and that there was, you know, inclinations that they were involved in this. You know, I'm not going to name those channels. You all know the channels, and just talked a lot of shit about this family and then had all their own wild conspiracy theories in all of this. Oh, it was drugs. It wasn't Kohberger. It was these 5 individuals, or it was students, or whatever the hell it may be. And all these retarded theories that people came up with, and they were further from the truth. And look at this. At the end of the day, this guy's now going to confess. This guy's now going to confess to these crimes. And, you know, shame on all of you. I hate saying that stuff, but shame on you. To go after this family and ridicule them and call them attention whores, that they just wanted to be on be on TV. I'm sorry. If someone, my family member, especially my daughter, my son, whatever it may be, I would be on TV every single freaking day like this family, screaming about getting answers for who killed my family member, who killed my daughter, who killed my son, whatever it may be. They had every right to do that. And I champion this family for being like this, because a lot of families don't talk and they go quiet and they don't speak out and they don't scream and rage. And they didn't falter. They just got out there and said, we want answers. So bravo to the Gonsalves family. All right, here we go.
God bless you, Steve. I think we just lost Shannon, but I'm sending you my my deepest
I will be live
love and wishes for some peace in all of this, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
There are people who are as angry as Steve Gonsalves. It was said today the internet is on fire with people who are angry that there's a plea deal, that there won't be a trial. Coming up after the break, I will tap into that with 2 podcasters who know more about the zeitgeist right now when it comes to the Idaho verdict, Annie Elise and Justin Shepard, right after the break. I don't know about you, but my phone blew up today as soon as news broke that there was a plea deal in the Bryan Kohberger, Idaho University.
It was so big that my mom was texting me. My mom was texting me about it. It's crazy.
Idaho quadruple murder case. We're a month from trial, right? It happens. I know. It's happened before. I've seen it before. the closer you get to trial, the more of a chance, right? Because the chips are down. Was she ready? Was Ann Taylor ready for trial? Maybe not.
No.
Maybe she got her butt handed to her with a few of the rulings last week where she wasn't allowed to point to anybody else and raise them as possible killers. Maybe that was the straw that broke the camel's back for her. In any case, the internet was on fire. And there are two people who know well what the mood was like out there. Annie Elise is host of the podcast Seriously with Annie Elise, and Justin Shepard is host of the TikTok Just in the Nick of Crime. They are both with me now. Annie, I'll start with you. Wow. The comments have lit up.
Yeah, it has definitely been very wild out there in response to this. People are angry. They are outraged. I mean, the fact that this plea deal happened without all of the families coming together and signing off on it, it's really upset the public, because a lot of this is also sparking confusion too. Like, how is somebody who is facing quadruple murder charges even being offered a plea deal?
Yeah.
If this is not what justice looks like, and arguably it could be construed as re-victimizing these victims all over again.
Yeah, that's what Steve Gonzalez told me. He is livid. He said that the majority of the families are in lockstep with him. Justin, what are you seeing from a lot of your followers?
So I can echo those same sentiments. People are unhappy about it. You know, there's a lot of people who have been following this case we're now getting on 3 years, and they wanted to see justice. They wanted to see the evidence. Not that is necessarily any of their business, but at the same time, the families are the biggest issue here. The fact that they weren't consulted, that they weren't brought in on this, they found out via letter, you know, that's just not the way these things should go. And the other thing, which is kind of a pretty common sentiment, is at the end of the day, you know, we don't know what would have happened in this trial, whether he would have gotten the death penalty or not. But the way this sits right now is, if Kohberger's family wants to pick up a phone and call, if they want to visit him, they still have the ability to do that if he's sitting in prison for the rest of his life. However, Maddie, Xana, Ethan, and Kaylee's family, they're never going to have that opportunity again. And it just really doesn't seem that fair.
You know, is there any, I'll get you to answer this one. Is there any talk in the social media world right now about demanding answers? At the very least, if this is going to happen, the families deserve, the people of Idaho deserve to know why. Why did you do it? And why these four?
I think that is the biggest point of contention, Ashley, because this is now robbing the families and the public of the full truth. Without the trial, a trial would have forced every detail, every timeline inaccuracy, any possible error to come to light. Now that's not happening. And if there is an allocution, we don't know how detailed that is going to be. And the public and the family, everybody wants answers. Nobody deserves it more than the family. But what was the motive? Why did this happen? And the questions go so far below the line as well into, everybody wanted to know, is there a link to the Papa Rogers account? What was he really doing? We know obviously now he wasn't stargazing as he had claimed to be doing. So there's just so many questions left unanswered. And I personally think that one of the biggest pieces of this too are the roommates, Dylan and Bethany. They now don't get their say in court. They don't get to face him. And there has been so much rumor and speculation about them over the last few years. And I would imagine now, with things shut down, without all of that discovery out, the rumors are going to continue flying. They're not going to be shut down.
Yeah, it's true.
Really good point. Justin, the gag order has been suffocating for people who are in the business of transparency. That's us, the media. This is the public process that we cherish in America. Other countries I have visited as a war correspondent, they don't have this. It's secret justice. It's hooded justice. It's gulag justice. We don't do that. The gag order will be lifted. How much of it do you expect to learn, Justin? And how much of it do you expect will always be a secret?
You know, that's a great question. And unfortunately, we don't know what we don't know. I'm hoping that a lot will come out because, you know, as we're talking about, the public wants to know. They want to know why he chose these four people. Why did he go to the house? What was he doing? Why did he plan it? If that's what he did, you know, what was the reason and methodology behind all of it? And hopefully that comes out. The other thing that I'm kind of hoping to come out is, you know, when you go back to the very beginning of this and you look at that no-knock warrant that was signed off by a judge in Pennsylvania, to get a warrant like that takes some incredibly compelling evidence. And usually you don't have that many things listed on the description of it. And when we saw that warrant, it was pretty lengthy. And so if that was just a portion of what they knew then and everything they found out since then,
yeah,
I'm hoping that we kind of get a little bit more of an idea of what all was out there that led them to track him down in the first place.
Amen to that. I'll be with you guys as we look to Wednesday and what we're going to learn on Wednesday. And then again, at the end of this month at sentencing, I trust we will learn a lot more, certainly towards the end of the month anyway. Thank you, Annie Elise. Thank you, Justin Shepard. I appreciate you scrambling last minute to be with me tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, another voice that has been on this story since the beginning, Jennifer Coffindoffer, former FBI contributor to News Nation. She knows more about murder cases than most people have ever read about in any book ever and then forgotten.
No, she doesn't. No, she doesn't. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Of course. Miss Coffindoffer. By the way, I'm going to let everybody know. Miss Coffee Daffer wanted to reintroduce herself back into the Idaho 4 case because she was so dead wrong in Karen's case. And she felt it necessary to take some shots at me the other day. And I'm going to share my screen here in a second and talk about some of those things that she wanted to try to take shots at me about. And the funny thing is, me and her are on the same page about this case. So I don't know why she decided to take a shot at me, because she was very upset that I supported Karen through her legal battles and knew that Karen was innocent all along. But let me find the tweet. It was fucking hilarious. And by the way, thanks for shouting me out, Coffee Daffer. You gave me some free publicity. Where is it? Let's see. Oh, here it is. I got it. So let me share my screen and then we'll finish up the coffee at the end. So she threw this out the other day prior to Let's Talk Live jumping on the free Karen Read bandwagon. I never jumped on it. I read into the case. I learned about it. I looked at the evidence. I followed the evidence, and I knew that Karen was 100% innocent. So I didn't jump on the bandwagon, Coffee. We spoke about the Idaho 4 case. It's true. Coffin Napper was on my channel. I actually had her on here and talked. It was the first real big guest that I ever had on my channel. And she said he had a fledgling channel and asked me to come on. And I said, sure. The live we did is linked below. And the funny thing is, as of right now, my channel has more subscribers than Jennifer Coffindaffer's channel, which is kind of funny. And she said the Idaho 4 case will be covered by many. That's great. I just hope the circus stays in Massachusetts for the sake of justice for Maddie, Kaylee, and Ethan Zana. And she linked the live stream we did together. And that's what's kind of goofy about it, is I actually agree with her in the Idaho case. So anyway, and I wrote back. I fired back at Coffee. She still blocks me on X, so she can't see my tweets. But I said, it is true. Coffindaffer did appear on my channel during the coverage of the Idaho 4 case. I've never hidden that. And I've always been transparent with my audience about it. And when it comes to the Karen Read case, we are on completely opposite sides, given her extensive law enforcement background and time with the FBI. I would hope she would have used some of those skills to objectively follow the evidence, as many other former law enforcement professionals have done. Instead, she allowed the emotions to cloud her judgment and align herself with individuals and creators who caused chaos through both trials. What's also puzzling is that she has me blocked on X, but used her appearance on my show in her tweet to promote her potential return to the Idaho 4 conversation. Oh, Coffee. Oh, Coffee. All right, here we go. Let's finish it out.
And one big question that Jennifer has is about why the offer was made in the first place. What exactly did this prosecutor have planned all along? What is
Dixie, I agree.
Record, the prosecutor with other murder cases? That's coming up next.
I agree. All right, let's.
You know, I'm of the conviction there is not one person on the face of this earth that would say, yes, I confess. I murdered 4 kids. And I will be fine with going to prison for the rest of my life with no opportunity for parole and no chance to ever argue this again, as long as you take death off the table. I am of the conviction that there is not a person on earth who would do that if they didn't do the crime. So if Bryan Kohberger is about to confess on Wednesday, okay, you got me. I did it. I confess. It means he did it. He never gets to argue with a jury that maybe says he did it, where he continues to profess his innocence and maybe even have girlfriends.
Yeah.
That's my one piece of solace in all of this. It means if he says he did it, he did it. Because who would take a deal like that, right? But then there's the question of the prosecutor who offered that deal in the first place. That's him right there. Just see the shock of white hair. His name's Bill Thompson. He's been at this business a long time. And when we first met him, it was at a news conference like this, where he said they made an arrest and he's not getting bail. But he wouldn't say a whole lot more than that. Turns out he's got a history in the business of prosecuting when it comes to plea deals. And that's where Jennifer Koffendorfer comes in. She is a FBI agent. She knows a lot about this case because she's been on it since day one. And she's here with me live as a News Nation contributor. What have you learned as you look back on Bill Thompson's career?
Well, he's had a long career. 1992, he first came on as a prosecutor, so about 33 years prosecuting. And when you look at trials or incidents, cases involving murder, he's definitely pled these out.
Can you fucking, for my Karen Reed supporters that might be watching the stream, can you fucking believe that she aligned herself with Plevin from Yellow Cottage Tales? She used to stream with that guy. Oh my God.
I could only find 3 that he took to trial. The Capone case, which was in 2014, Meister case in 2011, and the Shackelford case in 2000. Now, Capone was without a body, so that was, a difficult case. But he never sought the death penalty on any of those cases, Ashley. And the reason I looked this up a long time ago, I know. The reason I looked this up was because I wondered if he ever would even go for the death penalty in this case. And I was quite surprised that he did a long time ago when that decision was made in 2023.
You know, Brian Enton raised the specter in our last hour about Bill Thompson retiring, and that before the Bryan Kohberger, arrest happened, he was planning on retiring soon. Do you know what the timeline was? And is there a lot of speculation that he just did not want to prosecute this case? I hate saying that because I always believe the purest in people who are involved in the system. But what was the story of the retirement and the timeline?
Well, the story was he was going to retire and didn't. And I think he stayed on to help with this case, actually. I really think that he wanted to sort of see this through. But he's at the very twilight of his career. And certainly it was clear that he is not the sort of prosecutor that is very aggressive.
Let me ask you this, Jennifer. You and I have been around the block when it comes to these cases. And I always feel as though a deal is offered when the risk becomes too great for the prosecutors of a not guilty verdict, of a mistrial, of a hung jury. It's those things that usually spur a plea deal. This guy, to me, was dead to rights. They had so many bad facts on him. They had so much compelling evidence. Why do you think this deal was offered?
I think it's multifaceted why it was offered. I do believe that there is something to be said for sort of efficiency, saving money. And when I say that, Ashley, I'm not in that court. I don't believe that should have ever been even considered in this case. But I can tell you from being with these prosecutors, they talk about that, the time that's going to be saved, the money, et cetera, et cetera. Again, that shouldn't have been considered here. But you got to wonder any concerns they might have had. Certainly that's been running through my head. And, when I look at Bryan Kohberger, isn't it interesting? He was willing to murder them, but he's so afraid of death.
Good point. Let me ask you this. The family consideration, was not always that families were even consulted in this process. But in the last 25 to 30 years, that has become more of the norm across the country. Families and victims' family members are a part of the process. But families don't feel like they were part of this process. At least Steve Gonzalez told us he sure as hell felt like he wasn't, and that he's in lockstep with other family members of the kids as well. What's your thought about that? Is it a numbers game? How many of the victims' family members are on board? How many aren't? Or is it just partially what the victims' family members say?
Well, Xana Carno's aunt has also come out very, very adamantly that she was not for this deal. And you can imagine, Ashley, it would be different if the evidence weren't so overwhelming. But what is really the reason? What is a good reason? There is no good reason not to continue with trial. There really isn't. And like you said, I think the solace is that this can't be overturned. The solace is that there can't be something that goes awry during trial. But I tell you, Ashley, I can't believe it in a case like this that's so solid.
I'm with you. I was astounded. Look, I'm not in that courtroom either. Like you said, there are a lot of things that we don't know, especially with a gag, but this one looked pretty much like a lock. I said that about OJ too, but I did certainly feel that they had a pretty strong case. Ms. Koffendorfer, thank you for staying up late. I so appreciate this.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley.
She came out of
Always
her
good to have Jennifer Koffendorfer on. She knows her stuff. Coming up in a moment, I want to know what Bryan Kohberger's
she knows her stuff. How right were you in Karen Reed's case, fucking coffin daffer? Zippo zero zilch.
What Bryan Kohberger has to say. I want to know what the state of Idaho demands of Bryan Kohberger in order to get the benefit of this plea deal. Coming up next, an expert in Idaho law about the allocution and what that man on your screen owes all of us. Next.
A couple more minutes, we're going to wrap this one up.
For a lot of people, it's why. It's the question, why? Why did you kill those 4 university kids?
Yeah.
If you're going to confess to it on Wednesday, Bryan Kohberger, just tell us why. And while you're at it, maybe you can say what you did, how you picked these 4. How long did you plan this? And what did you do inside that house? These are all the things, at least I as a journalist want answered, and I am certain that a lot of the victims' family members, they want those details too. Are we going to get them? Will they come in the form of an allocution? Will Bryan Kohberger stand in court and not only say guilty, but answer the hows and the whys? Expert in Idaho law is Richard Block. He's an attorney in that state. He joins me now live. Can you answer that for me, Richard? Will we hear some sort of an allocution on Wednesday when he confesses and puts it on the record that he changed his plea? Will we have to wait until the end of July when there's a sentencing? Will we hear it at all?
So when the plea is entered, he's going to have to say what he did in order to cause the murders to happen. He's going to have to walk through the elements of the crime and say each element. And I've got the elements pulled up here on my phone right now, so I'll give them to you correctly. He's going to have to say when he did it. He's going to have to say he was in the state of Idaho. He's going to have to say that he engaged in a course of conduct. And he's going to have to define what that course of conduct is. In this case, it would be stabbing that led to the death of a particular person. So he'll go through each and every one of the victims here. And then he's going to say he acted without justification or cause. And he had malice of forethought. And malice of forethought means in Idaho simply that he intended to do the killing beforehand. And it can be a second beforehand, it can be an hour beforehand, it can be a year beforehand, but it has to simply be before. And then he's going to have to say that it was willful, deliberate, and premeditated, that he thought about it beforehand, and that he intended to do it, and he, in fact, followed through on whatever plan he had. So there you may get a little answer as to what it is. Kind of depends on your judge about how much of that detail the judge is going to want there, and the judge will want a little bit of detail.
Yeah, again, this may be very basic, just like he's saying. It might just be very basic. This is the plan. I thought about it. I wanted to do it. I did it. It might be very basic, and that's going to just suck. It's going to suck. We want to hear it. We want to hear everything.
He's got to put this in his own words, but you'll get some of that.
So that still sounds all really clinical to me. It doesn't give you any motive. It doesn't say why these 4 victims.
Not going to give
it. Doesn't say what he did on the second floor, whether he went to the first floor or the third floor. It doesn't say any of those things. And if you just get the elements covered on confession day and change your plea day, will you get more during sentencing?
Not necessarily. So there is something called a PSI, pre-sentence investigation, that happens in every single felony case. And there, a pre-sentence investigator will interview him, theoretically get his version of the facts, but he doesn't have to answer any of those questions. He could simply just nod at that point. Now, generally, once you've pled, it's a good idea to answer some of these things. You may not want to answer everything, but he doesn't have to answer, so you may never get any of that stuff out of him. That's going to be a decision him and his team make together about how he answers those questions.
Why? Why doesn't he have to answer it? He's getting a gift. He's getting his life. That is the greatest gift of all. Why doesn't he have to be compelled to cough up the whys, the hows, the where, all of those things to satisfy the good citizens of Idaho who've had to pay for this process?
So first of all, calling it a gift, I think, is incorrect. I think we should think of this as a win for the defense. A defense team in a death penalty case, their first mission is to beat the death penalty. And here they have accomplished mission number 1. So I think the first and most important thing to remember is that the defense pushed really hard in this case, consistently was fighting and fighting and fighting. And I don't know what happened internally. I don't know why the prosecutor offered the plea deal. If the defense suggested, I don't know how this all went down. But
yeah, I think this is the way it's going to go down to 0. I think it's going to go. He's going to admit to it, but it's going to be no real details. I think so too. I think so too. Cindy said, I'm going to be watching you live tomorrow. I work tonight, but I don't work tomorrow night, so I can stay up and watch. That's awesome. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people watching tomorrow. Here we go.
You can't qualify this as anything other than a win for the defense team. And I know they don't feel like it's a win right now because nobody likes to have their client plea to a murder case where they're going to likely get life in prison.
Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate that.
It is a win for them. in terms of does he have to answer this? The answer is he has to tell the judge what he did, but the details of motive and all those things, it depends on if the judge insists that he answers those questions or not. And most of the times they're not going to. They're going to want to stick to the elements and the clinical stuff.
Richard, I've got 20 seconds left. I have to ask you this. The gag order that's just been suffocating for journalists and family members alike, as well as the citizens, not just of Idaho, but across the country, around the world. Will that get lifted, and will we see those files? And I only have 20 seconds.
I think so.
Left.
I wouldn't expect to get much out of these people. Ann Taylor and Bill and the prosecutor, they're public servants, and they don't have much interest in a lot of publicity. I wouldn't expect you to get a lot.
Well, that's distressing to say the very least. I think people were just looking for answers. Maybe we'll never get motive, obviously, not an element of the crime anyway, but we certainly wanted some kind of answers. Richard Block, thank you so much. So appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you again for sure.
Wow.
Folks, thanks for sticking with me through these 2 hours. I've really appreciated it. I'm going to sign off and hand things over to my colleague.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation.
Wow. Wow. So tomorrow, the world will see. We will see what will happen tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, plea hearing of Bryan Kohberger. I think it's going to be very basic. I don't think we're going to get the intimate details unless he wants it all just to come out, for the sake of the families, for the sake of his family. But I don't think so. I think it's going to be very generic. And, listen, people will talk. People will talk at some point. I mean, there's going to be interviews. There's going to be documentaries. I mean, there's still a lot on the table here for this case. And, I'm going to keep following it. I'm going to keep following it. Sundays, we're going to continue with the local show here. We'll do all my local Massachusetts updates. There's still, some things going on in the Karen Reed case, but, it's time to rebuild and retool and see what else is out there that we can tackle and talk about and put it the right way instead of, through conspiracy and bullshit, doing really deep dives into these things and figure out factual things that are happening, not just speculating and going, it's an Aryan Brotherhood and the people under the stairs, and it was all the other students involved. It was everybody else that was involved in the house, and it was a sorority thing. It was a ritual killing. I mean, we heard about this shit for almost 3 years, and how fucking embarrassing that you would put that on your channel for clicks and views. Shame on all those people. I hope people leave those types of channels. There's one specific channel that I'm thinking about right now that a lot of the content they put out, you've been wrong. You have been wrong. And I hope that in multiple cases you've been wrong and you look like a fucking jackass now. And for people to continue to follow that channel, I just don't know why. They probably have a lot of backpedaling to do today. But anyway, I think this is going to end tonight. I'm tired. I worked all day, and tomorrow we'll be back live, 12:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the 1 o'clock hearing. I'm sure all the major networks are going to cover it. So, we'll pull it up and go through it and see what happens. But I appreciate everybody for hanging out, and supporting LTL Media. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe here on the channel, and I would appreciate it. So tomorrow, again, set your reminders, 12:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the live plea bargain hearing of Bryan Kohberger will be here, and I'll talk to everybody. I'll talk to everybody soon. Have a great night, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.